are delighted to be able to share with you some ideas and thoughts and some perspectives on effective assessments in online education. And while it has my name up there, our primary hostess today is Nicole Alford, and we are delighted to be sharing this with you, Nicole. So let me know when you would like to go back to the poll. In the meantime, I will take us to the overview. Is that showing up?
Yes, it is.
Great.
Yes, so today we're going to talk about effective assessments in general, kind of what you guys have used in your course, and what tools that we can talk about today as to how we can be effective in online, especially with high and low enrollment courses. We know that assessments can differ when you have 200 students and versus 25 students. And so we do want to take that into consideration today, as well as it differs by domain, right? So we want to make sure that we hear from everyone as to how you handle assessments in the online now that we've all kind of done remote for a little bit, kind of how that has changed your assessments and maybe what have you implemented that is a little different than in a face-to-face setting. We'd love to hear that. And so hopefully we will get that in our dialogue today. So when we start thinking about assessments in online, the first thing that we do here at the center is objectives. And what it is Bloom's taxonomy. So the way we tell the level of difficulty of a particular course, right, is based on the objectives that they have for their students. Really, it doesn't have to be a course, it could be a workshop, it could be anything, the module, the week, the assignment, whatever level of Bloom's taxonomy that you're looking to assist the students on is dependent kind of in this hierarchical way that we see objectives. So if you have the more identify, the more lower level, that's good for like a 1000 level course where they're really just understanding the basics, or an intro course of what's happening, and maybe more of the evaluate, analyze are going to be of a higher order thinking, maybe for like a 3000, 4000, or a graduate level course. So the first thing when you're thinking about your assessments is, where do you fall on that spectrum? What courses are you teaching? What goals do you have for your students? And seeing what objectives you have, or maybe your SLOs, right? So just kind of thinking about where you are there. Then identify ways to know if your students are meeting the objective. So you have these objectives, and how do you know that they know, right? How do you know that they are able to evaluate a scenario, or analyze a scenario, or identify an item? So that's how we approach assessments. So we think, okay, where is it on the level? And then how are we going to know that they have left the course with what you intended? Um, and then we love student-to-student interaction, and it can be a very smooth process in online, especially in something like what we're in now. So we're in WebEx trainings, and in our last session, we went into breakout groups, and there's a lot we can do in an online environment or a remote environment that has student-to-student interaction, whether that's discussions, group projects, and hopefully we'll discuss some of that today for large and small enrollment classes. And then we'll briefly go over some e-proctoring options, as we understand that academic integrity is very important when we talk about assessments. So this is what I was talking about in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, is under identifying the level that you want to assess your students at. And there's kind of like 5 categories. And again, we'll share the Bloom's link with everyone, and it's actually from Quality Matters. So Quality Matters sent out it sent updates, provides guidance for objectives kind of every semester. Um, and it helps understand what they're looking for. And so let me talk a little about what Quality Matters is. So Quality Matters is a national standard for quality in online courses. And so we strive for that at all times, and exceed it if possible. So that's kind of why we follow the Quality Matters Bloom's Verbs options. And so the first thing is you think about the taxonomy, you think about the definitions of each one, kind of, what does it mean if you're at the identify stage or the more advanced stage? And so they go over that. And then there's process verbs. So process verbs is kind of what I was referring to in my examples, like the identify, the analyze, the evaluate, the discuss, describe, etc. It kind of goes over what verbs do we use in order to assess the level in the taxonomy that we're looking for? And so that's kind of the reason why I would say we go through that. Um, and then assessments. So it gives examples. So um, in the creating level, which is that bottom level, it goes over things like um, uh, you know, a collage or no, that's more of the creating is the top level. Remembering is the bottom level. And maybe it's like a quiz or a worksheet, a handout, something like that. And so it gives examples of what types of assessments you could use to assess the students. And then after it gives like how to start questions. So that's what question stems are. So if you were writing multiple choice questions, for example, and you wanted to assess a recall or an identifier or something like that, it gives you things like, how many or what is or who or can you name, and that type of thing. So you ensure that your assessments are getting at the level of knowledge that you want in the objectives. Dr. G, do you have anything to add
Yep.
to that?
Sh- Um, well, and I was just going to say that we want to make sure that each course has a variety of different ones of the levels. We certainly usually start with the remembering and having them start thinking about the how they know the content, identify and describe, and be able to point out. But we also want to make sure that we include a variety of different types of assessments, things from the Quality Matters list, the Bloom's list. Actually, that one I noticed that we're using comes from Abby. Are you ready for this? Texas A&M.
Excellent.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about alignment, Nicole.
Sure. So once we have, so just to kind of summarize to this point, so we're thinking about our assessments. What are, and our objectives. So what do we want at the end of this course? What do we want the student to be able to do? And then we're structuring that into objectives that are measurable and identifiable and something that we can create assessments for. And so that's kind of where we're at. So now we know what we want them to learn. We have this objective that we're aiming for, and we have an assessment that goes with it. So, what I kind of just described is alignment. And so we kind of snuck it in a scaffolding way of ensuring that what you're asking your students to do and to evaluate or to produce for you is what they're being taught and what they're being expected to learn. So just an example. So if you have an assessment on um, owls, right? And then your objective is to identify various types of owls. Something that you could do is, as I was mentioning in the question stems, how many different species of owls are there, or having an owl species and say, is this a species of owl that lives on FAU's campus? Something like that. So we're making sure that the students are identifying the owl types or understanding. And that was just an example that kind of, I'm not an owl expert, but I saw an FAU logo and that kind of sparked my memory. Um, and that's kind of what we're referring to in alignment, is that what you're asking the students about is something that they were being taught or is in your lecture. So we want to make sure in your content and materials that they're being provided with the information in order to assess it. So if you have these objectives and you have this assessment, what does the student need to read or learn or listen to your lecture about. So what it also helps in what do you want to include in your lecture, right? So if you know that you're going to have a module on owls, you want to make sure that and the objective is to identify different types of owls. In your lecture, you want to make sure that you have different types of owls in there so that they can perform the assessment that you intended on having them have at the end of the course or
Can
the
I answer
module.
your question?
Sure, sure.
Burrowing owls.
Yes.
But yes,
Exactly.
the when we're thinking about the assessments, because that is, of course, what we're talking about right now, we want to make sure that those assessments are going to give us the evidence that they have accomplished those objectives. And of course, as Nicole said, the content that you provide for them is going to give them the foundation material so that they can then do the assessment and give you the evidence that they have accomplished the objectives. So that's that whole alignment piece all the way across. And then, of course, our module level objectives then assess back up to the content of course level objectives.
Exactly. And what we do at the Center for Online and Continuing Education to kind of map out what this alignment will look like is we use a blueprint. And so if you've done an e-design with us, which is the development of a new online course or a course design update, which is where if you have taught the course online before or been through one of our processes and you want to update the course, or Quality Matters, you probably have heard Blueprint before. And what it does is it allows us to make sure that we have all the content objectives, assessments, and materials to demonstrate that alignment for our Quality Matters standards that we were talking about. So that's kind of our purpose and how we do it here. And if you take e-certification, a quick plug, which Dr. Judy facilitates, it's an excellent workshop to kind of learn more about alignment and practice it and get some really nice feedback in building a blueprint in terms of structuring the alignment.
Okay, so Nicole, you referenced those huge classes. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with that. But what in the world can I do if I have one of those huge classes?
Yes. So thank you for that transition. So um, if you have a large classroom, we understand that there's a certain amount of, feedback and grading that we want to provide to each student. And we can do that through these techniques here. So having a large question bank is a way that you can assess kind of the more lower level of Bloom's taxonomy. That's the like remembering and understanding parts, depending on how you create the questions. And I also highly recommend providing feedback. In the responses in Canvas. So when you're creating a quiz in Canvas and you create a question, there's the option to include like, answer option A, B, C, D, E, right? But underneath that, there's a little ellipse, and it allows you to provide immediate feedback to the student, whether when they got it right or wrong. So if they get it wrong, you can provide them with automatic feedback on why they got it wrong or what more explanation or where they can find the answer in the content. And if they got it right, explaining more about, how this applies to a certain discipline or something like that. And if you write that feedback while you're creating the question, that'll be immediate feedback for all your students if you have like 200. And that's a great way to streamline the process is while you're creating that question, put that feedback in there so that the students can get that. So that's just a quick tip. Some techniques, if you have a high enrollment class and you are using a large question bank or quizzes or questions to ensure that kind of that academic integrity piece that we'll talk about is to shuffle the question answers. And so if option A is burrowing owls. And, maybe when another student takes it, option C will be burrowing owls. So the students can't just post an answer key anywhere because it'll change each time. And you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to see the order of what the student got. So if a student has a question about, hey, like, I thought, we had white owls or snow owls. I didn't know we had burrowing owls. Why did I get this question wrong? Hopefully, if you put that immediate feedback in there, it would explain that. But if not, you could actually go into that student's quiz and see it was A, B, C, what they selected and why. So that's just a quick tip on that. Timed exams, giving students a limited time frame, whether it's they have from Sunday to Sunday, but the exam they only get 2 hours between that day, or making sure that we are flexible with our students in this time. They may have unique circumstances given the climate we're in, so just being aware of when we do set timed exams, but that also can help with academic integrity, limiting the number of attempts. So really, that's completely your choice as to how many attempts. I typically like 2 attempts, just because they get to kind of see it once. I don't show them the answers, but they know what they got wrong. And then they get the opportunity to learn about what they got wrong, and an opportunity to take it again. That's typically what I do. But again, that's kind of your decision. But just an idea is to not maybe give unlimited attempts on something that is a high stakes exam, but maybe a couple or just one, whatever you prefer. And then when I mentioned that I didn't show them the answers per se when I'm giving a quiz, is in Canvas, there are some features that you can provide students based on the number of attempts with an immediate feedback response. So if I take it, I can see what is the correct answer and what is the wrong answer, or I can just see that I got the question wrong. And so limiting those feedback options could also help until like the last attempt, or if they only have one attempt, then showing them the answers. Displaying one question at a time. That also kind of helps with cognitive load, and it kind of depends on the student, if they can focus on one question at a time, or if you feel like there's a lot of questions and you want them to be able to like move kind of seamlessly through them. You can show them all at once, but it's kind of up to you on that as well. But just a tip is to display one at a time. Um,
Let me jump in. Alana Edwards has indicated that in a Canvas training, they suggested against showing just one question at a time because of loading issues. And so I don't know, I have not heard that before. So that's an interesting point. Thank you, Alana.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that could be if they aren't going to load, or they have to go back and forth each time. Maybe that could affect the time. So that's a good point, and something to consider. Um, the other thing we talked about is open book multiple choice questions. And so this is a great way, like even if they have the book open, do they have enough time to search for all the answers if they didn't study? Or, are they scenario based? Meaning like, did you ask them in a way where they had to like think about the concept that you're talking about and apply it to the situation? So it's not going to be in the textbook or on the internet or, anywhere else. They actually have to think about the scenario and apply it. Is another great way for large class assessments. And case scenarios with multiple questions, kind of pulled from each area. So let's say you have a case, maybe that's like a paragraph long, and there's like like specific, like the scientific method. So maybe you have an experiment in a paragraph of like a scenario that someone performed. And maybe one question is, what is the hypothesis? And another question is, what's the independent variable, right? So they can have the same scenario, but two different questions. And then, of course, having that randomized so that even if someone gets the same scenario, they get a different question. And that kind of helps with that. And it allows you to have that, to use that scenario multiple times. So when you're creating, a large question bank, having the ability to kind of reuse that scenario, but pull different questions is really nice. So you don't have to think of 100 scenarios. You can think of maybe 10 scenarios and have 5 questions for each scenario. Something like that is also nice.
So we indicated, what was it, Nicole, that we had at least 7 who said they've had large classes. I'd
Yes.
like to hear from them about some of the strategies that they've used for effective quizzes in those large classes. I can't, it boggles my mind.
Yes. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Shahada.
Great. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for going over this because this is just having those alternatives explained is so helpful. I've used the shuffle, the question answers, the timed exams, a number of them for quite a while, but one that I actually started using this semester is having my questions in a question bank and getting everything randomized. And it's just such a great feature. And it really does, not that our focus is, make it difficult, I guess, for students to be able to share with each other, because that's always our fear as professors, sharing questions and answers with each other. I feel like having it timed and then that randomizing feature and the shuffling the answers it really does a great job of, you know, keeping that,
Yeah, yeah. Making it a
yeah,
little
I
bit
mean,
more of a challenge.
yes, kind of making it more of a challenge for them for sure. For sure.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
excellent. And my solution is make it open book, and then and so that they don't have enough time to answer to look everything up, but I want them to know where the things are in the book anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are awesome. And these are all within Canvas. So you don't have to have any other tool but Canvas quizzes to do all of the stuff we talked about. So that's kind of the nice feature of Canvas is you have all of these options kind of right at your fingertips.
Okay, and before we move on, Michael Crane, Michael, did you want to have your mic open? We can do that if you would like. Otherwise, I'll read it for you. He says that in large classes, the publisher question banks with randomization of questions, and he has used that tool and shuffled the answers. But as we all know, large publisher question banks will end up out there at the drop of a hat. Yeah,
Yeah,
good, valid point, Michael. Thank you.
absolutely. Sometimes I understand that sometimes there's a need to use those publisher banks, but what really may trip students up is if you put some of your original questions in the mix, they won't have they'll be searching for that one question that's not there, and it may take up a lot of their time because they think that it's part of the publisher question bank, but it's not. So if you shuffle in maybe like a fourth of original questions, it may help that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we can, whew, all right, high enrollment classes. I'm going to stick with my classes of 30 and less, okay?
All right, yes. So these low enrollment classes allow for just a different type of assessment. And I know we got about 15 minutes left. I am looking at the clock, and I want to make sure that we have a lot more to get on in this presentation. But with low enrollment courses, you can do that project-based assessments, the short answer, those essay questions, that authentic assessment, and a way to really help with the efficiency in grading is to have those rubrics. And for the academic integrity is the Turnitin plagiarism software. Dr. Judy, do you want to talk a little bit more about rubrics and authentic assessment?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Of course I do. I do love the whole idea of authentic assessment because that is and sure there is a place for standardized tests and that type of a test. But if it's the only thing we're using, then that's not the best tool. Authentic assessment is using those tests, using the performance-based test, using presentation tools, all of those things combined together to provide a really, really solid overview of what our students are getting out of our class. I mean, in my mind, it doesn't get any better than that. And yeah, I'm biased, no question about that. No question about that. And of course, we have a number of professional development sessions on effective use of rubrics. And that, number one, makes it so easy to assess some of these things that we may think of as being a challenge, but with a really good rubric, it's pretty easy and pretty quick to go through. Now, I say quick to go through because I'm talking class enrollment sizes of 30 or so, but pretty easy to take a quick look at what they're doing and give them responses that give them feedback and give them support in moving forward, so that they are actually learning from the rubric and learning from those activities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know we didn't put project-based assessment on the other one, in the high enrollment, is what I mean. And but you can definitely do project-based assessments in a high enrollment class if you work in groups. And again, there may be some 21st century skills that occur when anytime you have student groups, but it allows them to practice that skill and can alleviate if they're in a group some of that large enrollment size.
So
Um,
anybody want to share any comments about any of the types of assessments you use in a smaller size class? We'll keep that open. Okay, Dr. Gordon, students aren't satisfied with rubric grading. They feel like it's impersonal. Wow, that's interesting. I'd like to think more a little bit about that one. Like them to understand how they will be graded. Yeah, well, but to my mind, that's what a rubric does. It gives them, and my personal preference is the single point rubric, because that way you can tell them exactly what it was that you were looking for, rather than have to designate, okay, if you only want to see, here's all you have to do, rather than here's the expectation. But that's a personal preference. But yeah, that's an interesting comment. Um, and Nancy, did you want to open your mic again? Thank you. And Michael, briefly discuss what's a good rubric. We've got several PD sessions on good rubrics, so we can send those links out to you as well. But yes, an effective rubric is a really, really important, a key tool.
Yes, I know. I just wanted to add in, I usually add some additional feedback, like in the comments section,
Yeah.
just a couple of sentences. I do find that the rubric provides a more detailed, like regarding each criteria, but I really like what you said, Judy, regarding the single point rubric. And that's the rubric where you're able to include your comments in there, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to do it too.
Yes, and Elise has indicated that students with test anxiety could write a paper. What a great uh, option to provide for students. I love that. Thank you for bringing that to us. A student with high test anxiety wrote a paper about the different types of math topics. I love that. What a great idea. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So in the next, I'm going to ask if the COSI host could mute their mic. It looks like we're getting some feedback. But I think maybe we can switch over into the effective practice handout,
Sure.
because that'll give us, so we have summarized our presentation into a handout. So the Center for Online and Continuing Education worked with the Office of Information Technology to kind of structure it in a kind of easy digestible, kind of what we went over today. So something for you to reference. And if we scroll down just a little bit on that screen, we have kind of identify what types of assessment fits the objectives. And that would kind of go over what we were going to do in the next kind of couple slides, is figuring
Got it.
out what assessments kind of work best with what objectives, and then what are the advantages and disadvantages of them. And so that's something that that we can definitely discuss as well. And then if Dr. Judy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next page of that handout for us.
Of course. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Perfect. And then so we'll talk a little bit about e-proctoring. And so I did skip over a couple things in the presentation, but no worries. We will definitely send this out as well as a link to the handout. And so e-proctoring is assessment tools that make sure academic integrity is maintained. And so we talked a lot about how we can do it just with Canvas, and those tools are definitely helpful, and we would highly, highly recommend those. But if you have a more high stakes exam, something maybe it's got evidence of cheating in the past, or something that they need for licensing, or something intense that we have to ensure academic integrity on. There are e-proctoring tools, and in this resource, if you scroll down just throughout the page, we have a couple of the ones that we have available and some information about. I know there's a lot of questions, what if my students don't have a webcam or internet access or a laptop, or how do they do a 360 scan? We have those FAQs and some resources that OIT, the Office of Information Technology, Instructional Technologies team, and our department kind of work together to produce some answers for and some suggestions on how to handle those types of things. And that would be on the Keep Teaching and Keep Learning sites /proctoring. And those links are at the bottom of this second page. And so it kind of goes over what to do if you're going to use e-proctoring and what types of things you want to include in a syllabus, or even in the assignment instructions, maybe the module content before using e-proctoring, giving them a tutorial or a practice test. So Dr. Judy, if we go to one more page on that, perfect. We have kind of a nice decision tree to kind of determine if proctoring, what type of proctoring or academic integrity kind of would be best for your course. Again, we have those options that we talked about randomizing, question banks, timed exams, everything all in Canvas, and that would not need an e-proctoring situation. But evaluating if perhaps the type of assessment could be changed into maybe a project base or something where the academic integrity could be upheld in a little different way. But if we need an assessment that has to be that's high stakes, that's important, again, maybe for accreditation or whatever your department or your discipline has, if you do use them, how to select kind of the best option for that. And so we have kind of a breakdown there as well, and just kind of give some more information on that. I know we have about 4 minutes left, and I want to leave time for questions and to open the mic if anyone has kind of how they've used their assessments. And we did have a really fun, we want to hear kind of like your unique, thank you for hopping back to the PowerPoint, Dr. Judy. If we could maybe go to that unique question, how people are being adaptive in this time using their assessments. We'd love to hear from you. So Dr. Judy is sharing her screen and kind of letting us know she has a nice word cloud of how the question we asked in the beginning, kind of what types of assessments you use in your course.
So most everything, a great deal of the things that we have talked about definitely were covered in that. So we have an audience of experienced assessment people with us today. Thank you so much.
Yes, it is just about that time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, we're here to talk about alignment. If you want to enroll in e-certification with Dr. Judy, that's a great way to learn more about that. And we're also here for any other questions you have about assessments, academic integrity, or anything like that, and how we can assist you in your online course. All right, thank you so much. We will end the session now, and we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Have a wonderful
Thank you
day.
so much.